I'd like to show you this one. It's a Morgan, but somewhat unusual, and may well be unusual to a lot of people who see it for the first time. In the late 1940s, Morgan wanted to get as many cars produced and increase their turnover. The most time-consuming part of the process for Morgan was putting the bodies on, so they decided that they would sell rolling chassis to any garages that would take them on, and 3 rolling chassis were sent to a garage in Exeter, and dutifully then they sent these down to bodybuilders called Ellis Brothers in Newton Abbot, and Ellis Brothers produced 3 exactly like this particular model you're looking at now, and this is believed to be the only remaining one of those 3 that Ellis Brothers bodied. Well, you're looking at what is described as a charabanc, multiple seat vehicle. It seats about 9 people. It is a bring your own cushions model, and this was built, as it says on the windscreen there, by de Dion Bouton during the First World War. Wasn't registered till 1918, but we do know from about 1915 until the end of the conflict this was utilised as British officer transport on the Western Front. After the war, all the vehicles that survived were sent back to de Dion. They were reconditioned, if you like, and then sold back to the general public in about 1920. I just mentioned the little aircraft on top. It's not incidental. 2 weeks after I bought this motor car at auction, I saw this aircraft in a local charity shop window. Went in and looked at it, and it is in fact a French aircraft called a Newport 16, I think, and it was commemorates a very famous French flyer called Nugent, and he survived the war, and with a fellow flyer from the war called Carr, they, like many of the pilots from the First World War, the adrenaline was still rushing, and they thought they'd try to do the cross-Atlantic. And they got nearly to Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, but went down into the drink and they lost their lives and they were never found. So they survived the war, and I did think, being a bit sort of fantasy-wise with this, that in its real life-size shape might have flown over this car during the war. So I thought it would be apt for it to rest on the top of the car as it is. This particular construction, shall I put it that way, that you're looking at, was made by Peugeot. They first introduced these in 1939, which might give you a little clue as to why they were being produced. They were used throughout the war by the French and Belgium Air Force and their armies. The front trunk here, the armies used these as auxiliary medical vehicles. So the trunk here would have been full of medical equipment, probably a fair bit of morphine as well, and the driver would have been a qualified nursing auxiliary. Their first job was to drive as close to the front as they could get with this vehicle, assist loading the stretcher ambulances, then move on to the less injured, the walking wounded if you like, patch them up so they could walk back to the field hospital. And if all the stretcher ambulances had been full, there were facilities for a stretcher to be put across the front of this vehicle so they could take one more casualty back to the field hospital. On the other hand, the Air Forces used these as mobile repair maintenance vehicles. Very often they had no hangars and the runways had been bombed, so the aircraft themselves were landing in fields or wherever they could get down safely. As soon as they landed, one of these would turn up, help the pilot get a camouflage net over the aircraft. They'd have all their repair equipment in the trunk, service it on site, refuel it there and then, so that it could take off as soon as possible and get back to the fray, so to speak. This particular one you're looking at dates from about 1954. I think they produced them until about 1955. And typical French utility vehicle, you could see all sorts of tradespeople making use of these. I have got a picture that I found on the web of one of these being used as a laundry delivery vehicle with the old wicker baskets. They'd removed this, there was one wicker basket in the recess here, and then there was another one piled on top of it. And I only presume that the driver on it could look through the hole where the handles were so he could see where he was going. Crime Watch, some years ago now, had to do a reconstruction of a bank robbery where the robbers had actually used a blue Robin Reliant like this one because it was the only vehicle that would go between the bollards where the bank was. So when they were trying to do the reconstruction, they found this particular vehicle and thought it was wonderful, but they forgot to cover up the number plate. And the owner, about 3 weeks later, was on holiday in Cornwall, and he got arrested 3 times in Cornwall because he was driving the car that they'd seen on Crime Watch. Well, this is a 1970 Austin J40 pedal car. In fact, it is the last one ever produced of these J40s. They were started being produced in the 50s after Leonard Lord, the owner of the Austin Motor Company, had heard that they were trying to provide employment for miners in Wales who had suffered lung damage, etc. So he decided he'd open the factory in Wales, and these were produced in Wales from the mid-50s, as I say, up until 1971, when this one was the last one to come off the production line. I bought this one at auction at Bonham's some 10 years ago, and at the time I thought it was expensive, but they've seemed to have gone up even more. And obviously they do race these, the children race these at the Goodwood Revival. So there we go. I'd just like to point out this little machine here. It is from the Second World War. They're affectionately known as Tiny Tims, and they're basically a petrol-driven generator for recharging all their radio communication batteries when they're out in the field. So that's what that one is.